We are going to have an honest to goodness conversation today about weight loss because my guest today is an expert in that field. She is the founder of Radiant Health. She practices evidence based obesity medicine. She's certified in lifestyle medicine, board certified. And oh, by the way, what really sets her apart is the way that she's able to put pieces together for her patients that most doctors aren't able to, but she's here today to tell us how in the world she's able to do that. She is Dr. Richa Mittal, and she is a great friend of a friend of the show, Dr. Will Bolsowitz. So I am so excited that you're here because we are going to have a fantastic conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
When you talk about putting those pieces together for patients and really taking that larger kind of holistic look at things, what is it initially that drew you to going that route as opposed to what I would call traditional obesity treatments?
Well, what really took me there was my whole journey in medicine. I started off working in the hospital setting, seeing people who were coming in with illnesses, and I quickly realized that, they were all kind of a conglomeration of things that came together because of years of chronic disease. And I felt like there was a void in the medical system where we were seeing patients, we were doing our best, working so hard, but we weren't able to make the impact that we wanted to be able to make because we didn't have time to address all the other factors that really day to day affect people's lives, whether it's their choices in terms of their food, whether it's movement, whether it's stress, sleep. There's so many factors that come into play when we talk about health and health habits. And I wanted to be able to make an impact in a different way, maybe outside of that traditional model.
Do you think that we're kind of set up to fail in terms of our weight, our overall health right now, the way that the majority of us are living our lives in this country? I mean, you just look at the statistics, right? More than 40% of us have obesity. You got three quarters of us who are at least overweight. Um, and when people are like, well, I don't know why this is happening, a lot of them do feel like they have been set up to fail. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, the optimistic part of me hopes not. But there are definitely a lot of things that work against us, whether it's just, stresses of modern day living, the need for convenience, busy schedules. On the individual level, we've gotten away from cooking and preparing and being more connected with our food. I think as a medical system and a healthcare system and even a reimbursement system, insurance companies don't really cover a lot of the time that is needed to be able to focus on prevention. I think, social media and that instant need for instant gratification and quick answers really isn't the answer. I'm hoping that through the work that you and I do and other people do, that we're hopefully spreading awareness about the importance of really the whole approach and that, all of it matters. And you're right, in a way, the system definitely works against us, but I'm hoping that we're not completely set up for failure.
I don't want to speak in totalities here. I didn't mean that all of us 1000% are set up for failure. Because I mean, you look at a lot of the success stories, um, and you see so many of them. I mean, clearly, there is a way to achieve success when it comes to your health. So let's keep with that rosier picture. For those who are frustrated, though, when it comes to losing weight and keeping it on, hold up. Let me tell you this. All right. When I was still overweight, I mean, I'm sure you hear this from patients all the time. You go down the scale, you go up the scale. You go down the scale, you go up the scale. And what I realized in one particular instance was that, I'm the kind of guy that can't handle having, one nacho or go to the drive-through just one day without having another nacho or going to the drive-through the next day again. You kind of get hooked on these foods, and we're starting to see more and more and more research into this and more evidence coming out that say, hey, yeah, you can become as addicted to food as you can any other substance. As a matter of fact, there was a study that just came out where the researchers, I believe, led by someone at the University of Michigan, concluded that these ultra processed foods that are so prevalent right now in the standard American diet meet the same criteria that was set forth by the Surgeon General for tobacco. Do you when you talk to your patients, what is something that you glean from them in terms of how much of a hook these ultra processed foods have in them?
Yeah, no, I think that they absolutely do, and perhaps is experienced differently for different people, which they do mention in the paper, because I think it's important to recognize that, addiction can be partially due to the substance and partially due to perhaps the susceptibility of particular individuals to be more susceptible to that feeling, that craving, the dopamine high, the urges, and to your point about not being able to just eat one. Although I think we all know that certain characteristics of those types of ultra processed foods are there. The tagline for I think it's Lay's potato chips. I bet you can't just have one. They've been developed that way, right? Because we're supposed to want more, and they sell more chips. So definitely, ultra processed foods and addiction can play a role. I also think that it's important to realize that when we put a morality behind a food, though, so a lot of people are on diets, right? And I work with people who have been on so many type of diets, and the all or nothing, or the I can never eat X, Y, and Z again, whether it's chips or cookies or whatever, what have you. That mentality also leads to kind of a backfiring on that approach, where you have to slowly perhaps be able to enjoy some indulgent food, whatever that you're classifying as an indulgent food, in a way that's sustainable, because again, we eat for a lot of different reasons. We eat for social reasons, for nourishment, for enjoyment, for cultural reasons, and maybe some of those foods can be enjoyed in a small portion. But yes, there are absolutely people who are able, or are not able to stop eating certain foods, and they are developed that way.
Yes, and that's where it gets tricky. My message is that there is not a one size fits all solution for anybody. That said, I'm also very much based off of my own history and likelihood of becoming addicted to whatever. I just choose abstinence when it comes to ultra processed, high fat foods. Certainly have not had any sort of fast food now in 13 years. But you hit on something though when people come to you, and I remember distinctly, before I had bariatric surgery, I remember, having to go to these groups where people, the number one question that they had was, when will I be able to eat, insert their favorite food here again? And it terrified them to not be able to have that relationship with that food that they had been enjoying their entire life ever, ever, ever again. And so it took me a while in this journey to kind of reach the point that, well, maybe when I'm talking to people, it should not necessarily be, it's not that you can never eat that food again. It's just that your relationship with it has to change. Case in point, if I wanted to eat French fries, I'm not going to go to the drive through and get French fries. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the kitchen, I'm going to get a potato, I'm going to chop it up, and then I'm going to throw that in the air fryer so I can control all of the stuff that I don't want with those French fries, right? I just get nice, crispy potatoes at that point. If you present it that way to your patient, that it's not a breakup, but the relationship with the food has to change, do you think that that's more palatable to them and it takes away a lot of that fear and anxiety?
Absolutely. And I think the key is find other things that you like. We have to enjoy our food. And if you find other things and other ways, and that's part of that culinary medicine angle, to help people find different ways of preparing foods that they've enjoyed that serves them. But hey, not saying you can never have something, because the trick is you can have it, you're choosing not to.
Yeah, And it's a hard choice, you know? I mean, the daggone this thing is like, here we are, I mean, more than a decade into it, doc, and I'm still getting cravings for I mean, Taco Bell was, always, you know, my number 1 addiction, and to this day, if I'm watching a game and Taco Bell's got some sorta new crazy concoction out, I'm just like, "Ooh, that sounds pretty good right about now," and then it's just like, "Psh, what are you thinking? Like, come on, man, get yourself together." It's weird how our brains are wired like that. When you're I mean, when you're coaching your patients to deal with those types of cravings, you know, so that they don't necessarily give in to them and they don't go on a fast food binge, right? What's some of the advice that you give them, you know, short of go crazy, but make sure you don't do it tomorrow?
Yeah, I think, number 1, you can if you want, but let's pause and consider. Delay, don't deny. So, again, it's about being mindful. This is a thought. It doesn't mean I have to act on it. It doesn't mean I have to vilify myself for having the thought. It's a thought. Making sure to not go long periods of time without eating to where actual hunger is also exacerbating the cravings. Working on stress management is huge because a lot of times the urge and the cravings for highly palatable or ultra processed foods comes during time of high stress. And I help my patients identify what those stressful triggers are and find other ways to speak to yourself. So I call it their love language to themselves. And food is an easy love language to yourself. It's readily available, it's quick, we can move on and continue to do other stuff. But actually pausing and thinking about what is it that you're actually feeding? Is it a need for something else? Work on that. And then sleep is the last one. When people stay up at night, we have a lot of different reasons why we might do that. Again, your guard is down, you're more vulnerable, and making sure you're getting adequate sleep is also important in that. But I think delaying, not denying, and that self conversation is really important.
You work with your patients on identifying those triggers. You are the first weight management doctor whom I've spoken with who has said that. Like, that is absolutely critical, and as somebody who is in those trenches, like, my hat is off to you majorly. Just that is mind-blowingly important, so thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Well, that kind of makes me sad that no one else has mentioned that.
I mean, but you know, I think that for a lot of us, you know, it's still viewed as, you know, food is a choice, right? And it's just, well, it's as simple as, well, eat this, don't eat that. And, you know, for me, the relationship is way more complicated than a simple yes, I'll eat this or no, I won't. You know, there are so many factors that go into it. And I remember like at one point initially, after I had lost not all of my weight, but I think I'm like 5'5", and I gotten down to like 170, maybe 175 pounds at this point. And my doctor turns to me and he's like, "You've done a really good job, but you need to eat a hamburger." Like, the dude straight up prescribed a hamburger for me. Now, I didn't know a whole lot about what it is you and I were talking about in terms of the science of food addiction, ultra processed foods, none of that. But what I did know was that there was a lot of just I mean, that's just bad advice. I love my doctor, but that was just like really, really, really bum advice. Do you see like that there's a big time need in terms of medicine for your colleagues, your fellow doctors to be kind of coached up in the way that you were?
Absolutely. And that a lot of us obesity medicine and lifestyle medicine doctors are on that side of things too. I'm part of the Dallas Obesity Society. We put on programs for other healthcare providers to become educated because this is all stuff that I learned later. We don't learn it in medical school. I'm hoping that there's more emphasis now on this because it's a huge crisis in our country and in the world. And doctors and other healthcare providers absolutely are the culprit for part of it. And also, we're on the front line. So, when people come in for other stuff, of course, there's weight stigma, and we need to be very well versed in being able to bring up the conversation in the appropriate manner and with respect and non-judgment. But yes, there's a huge need for more education around obesity and around nutrition and even behavior change that is lacking, sadly.
That brings me to like an interesting point here. We are living in a society where people are, um, and I guess rightfully so, very much aware of the stigma that exists surrounding weight. And we are trying desperately as a society to shed that stigma, to the point where I think that obesity is becoming, and this is just my opinion. I got a caveat being I'm not speaking on behalf of the physicians committee here. But I think that to a certain extent, we are even normalizing obesity further because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or make anybody feel bad. And that is not my intent. Nobody should be made to feel bad. Nobody is less than another. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that with some of this movement, we are trying to pull the wool over our eyes a little bit. How do you kind of combat that and tread, so delicately to have those conversations so as not to hurt somebody's feelings, but at the same time, you gotta at least acknowledge the truth here.
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I have really considered a lot. So, this health at every size type of movement where we're saying, there can be health at every size. That is true, but there's not health at every size all the time. And that can be true whether somebody has obesity, and that can also be true if they're quote unquote normal weight. Because weight and health, well, I guess we could say health is not defined just by weight, but it is a factor. And we can't not acknowledge the socioeconomic factors that play a role. And that is part of that health at every size mentality and philosophy to say, not all of these things are in our control, and there are social determinants that are absolutely at play. There are individual choices, and then there are also medical issues. And obesity is classified as a chronic medical disease, but it's not always a disease. And there are normal weight people who are not practicing health habits that actually have increase in their body fat, increased adiposity, who may not be classified as having obesity, who are not healthy. So we have to be more careful about how we define health. And in terms of getting away from the stigma, I think, like you said, everybody deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and non judgment. And we should bring up the conversations in a very thoughtful manner. I have patients who've lost a lot of weight who may still have a BMI over 30, who actually have significant improvements in their body composition and in their health habits. And they have a doctor who they go to see, they get classified, pinged as obesity because of their BMI, and then they get told, you probably need to lose some weight. No, they don't, actually, if you dig a little deeper. So we have to be more careful about how we have these conversations, and it needs to be very personalized. In terms of, when we first started this discussion, talking about food addiction, the pathways in the brain that trigger eating are very complex and are affected by many different things, including addiction type of mentality when it comes to food or the feeling of addiction. There's also, of course, behaviors, automated behaviors, stress, emotional issues, anxiety and depression that people may be self medicating with food. And then, of course, there are medical conditions that can cause weight gain too, which are important to screen for. Things like hypothyroidism. When people start to have weight gain, oftentimes they might be on the path to developing type 2 diabetes. That's important to recognize. And then, as far as the medications are concerned, in the studies looking at drug approval, usually about a 10 to 15% reduction in body weight is what's seen in the studies. Of course, there's people that fall outside of that. With lifestyle changes alone, even though those lifestyle changes are so important in terms of their health impact, Oftentimes, for weight management, studies show maybe about a 5 to 7% reduction.
So, okay. So that's interesting. I'll tell you what I think about, and I put myself back in my old 420-pound frame. And I think that had a doctor come to me and said, "Well, hey, Chuck, I'm going to write you a prescription for this, and it might help." The way that I would have interpreted that as is basically, okay, well, this is my solution to be able to keep eating and living my life the way that I have been living it, right? And case in point, I was put on blood pressure medication when I was a freshman in high school. And I used that to justify continuing to eat the way that I was eating. Matter of fact, right after I got that prescription, I went to the drive-through on my way home, and there is a concern that, and I'm sure I'm not the only person in the world that would feel that way. And that kind of goes back to the person having to be ready to change in order to make those changes. I mean, is that something that as a doctor that has ever kind of entered your mind? Like the patient might be thinking, "Hey, I got my solution. I'm going to keep going this way."
Well, I think part of that is the education, right? I talk to them about why it's so important. It's not just about weight loss, it's about improving your health. And if you're looking at your health habits and all the different parameters, whether it's your cholesterol, blood pressure, diabetes risk, sleep apnea, joint pain, a lot of those things will start to improve with weight loss, but it won't be the end all be all unless you also make the lifestyle change. And I think that when people, it's kind of both ways, right? Because you want people to make a change and see that it has an impact. But oftentimes with lifestyle changes alone, maybe they're not going to reach that goal just on their own, in which case they can become discouraged. So I think it's important to recognize and educate about the role that each component plays and making a choice together in a partnership. We should not discount the effect that lifestyle choices and nutrition choices can make on our health.
And yeah, I wasn't trying to challenge your judgment at
Oh,
all.
no, no, I
I
know.
was literally just thinking like, well, what would I have done in that case? And honestly, I thought the same thing about the surgery, going into it. Like I thought that like this was just going to buy me some time. I put the weight back on because virtually everyone who I know who has had that procedure wound up putting, 80, 90% of the weight back on. Some people are even a little bit heavier than when they initially started out. And I thought that too would be my fate. But, that surgery in conjunction with the lifestyle changes, is kind of what brought me to today's point. And in all honesty, I firmly believe that it was the surgery that got me started. But, I'm long-term success. I'm going to credit maybe 5, 10% tops to that. And the rest of it is lifestyle changes to make this a sustainable lifestyle moving forward to make sure that I don't have to worry about that weight coming back on. I mean, do you think that that's a pretty accurate assessment?
Absolutely, yes. And I think that, I think the problem is because when you make a lifestyle change, it's hard. It's not
Tell me
easy.
about it.
When people are going through that process, if they're struggling, they can give up, right? Versus if they start to see change and they have support. And when you're talking about addiction, when you're talking about long term patterns of coping, when we're talking about everybody experiences hunger in different ways, it's not fair for me to say to someone, well, you need to just eat less. And yes, absolutely, changing the way you eat and eating with a focus of abundance of lots and lots of plant-based, vegetables on your plate and cutting down on the fat and thinking about eating more fiber. All of these things are so important when it comes to the sustainability, because people who are on a diet, quote unquote, it's really hard mentally and physically, and they're hungry. And I think that that's where surgery, lifestyle changes, medication, they don't need to be mutually exclusive. But you're right, the foundation of it is the lifestyle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No question about it. And I know that there are a number of people who are going to be watching this and they're going to say, well, you know, uh, you took the easy way out, you got prescribed a med, you had surgery. I'm telling you from the patient perspective, there's not a single thing that was easy about it. And from a doctor perspective, I'm sure that you agree because there's still a heck of a lot of hard work that has to go into it, no doubt about it. I want to open it up and take some questions from the viewers here in just a minute. But you use the term diet, quote unquote. In your experience, how does a plant-based or plant-forward diet compare to others that are pretty popular, other fad diets that are out there in terms of long-term success?
Yeah, so I think it's great because there's a focus on the abundance of things on your plate, which mentally makes a big difference. And again, when you're trying to create a calorie deficit, how you get there matters. So focusing on what to add to your plate is very empowering and positive. I think that also just, being mindful again about where your food comes from is really important, and knowing that you're adding an abundance of fiber versus, when people do like a keto type of diet, you don't really get to eat very much. So, food that's very, fat heavy is going to be calorie dense. And mentally speaking, you don't really get to have much food. On the other hand, they do say that they feel less hungry when they go into the nutritional ketosis, which could have some value. But guess what? When you eat a lot of fiber, you're also very full. So I think the plant based diet is really great because it helps to fight hunger and you get to focus on what to add to your plate.
All right, time to open it up for questions here. Open up the doctor's mailbag. This one set in from Micah here. Are there any long-term risks to avoiding carbs? You were just talking about the keto diet there.
Yeah. So the biggest long term risk is that you're avoiding, well, number one, the sustainability of avoiding a whole macronutrient is very difficult. But number two, in terms of risks, you're cutting out fiber, which is very beneficial in terms of our metabolic health. So reducing our risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, blood pressure issues, our gut health, our colon cancer risk. So there's a lot of non-benefit in terms of completely eliminating fiber. So it shouldn't really be about avoiding all carbs. It should be about which carbohydrates are you choosing.
This is a really interesting question from Sherry. Everybody's looking for that one solution, right? Sherry is wondering whether there is truly a one size fits all diet that can work for everybody.
I would say there's not one size fits all, but there's a one size fits all approach that works for everyone, which is do something that's sustainable. And whatever you're going to do, don't call it a diet. Make it a lifestyle change, because when people have looked at different types of, say, dietary plans and how much people lose weight, the number one determinant of being able to sustain the weight loss is being able to sustain the dietary lifestyle. So, no, there is not one size fits all, but definitely make sustainable changes.
Yeah, talk about sustainability. I always think of that stat that gets thrown around. It's something like more than 90%, 95% of diets end in failure. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Is that even an accurate statistic?
Hard to say, but I think in our society, everyone seems to be on a diet at some point. Um, and I think that's, again, it's that temporary mentality. It's the, okay, I need to be on a detox. Like, no, you don't. You actually just need to change your lifestyle.
Do you think that somebody is kind of running a risk when they say, "Well, look, I'm going to go on a diet here. I'm going to lose 20 pounds, and as a reward, once I lose those 20 pounds, I'm going to eat an entire pizza or an entire chocolate cake." Do you think that that's kind of like the wrong mindset to have as you're trying to get healthy?
Absolutely. I think that all or nothing is not good. First of all, yo yo weight loss and weight regain is not good for our health, physically and mentally. But also, the all or nothing mindset is what leads to this pattern of losing and regaining. And I wanted to just quickly mention, because we haven't talked about this, binge eating. I see a lot of people with binge eating. And I think that it's important to recognize that binge eating disorder is the most common eating disorder in our country. And it's not like, oh, the way people use the term, like, oh, I binged on chocolate chip cookies last night. It's like they have a compulsion to eat, and it's driven by, of course, history of trauma and different types of coping, and should be addressed by a therapist in treatment. But also exacerbated by the all or nothing and these food rules of like complete deprivation and then complete indulgence.
Binge eating, I mean, that is a legit thing.
Mhm.
10,000 calories every single day without fail. And, if my day did not end with a trip to the drive-through, it was not a good day. Like, you did not wanna be around me. It was a nasty, nasty compulsion, and my heart goes out to anybody who struggles with that. John here, okay, this is one that universally everybody is going to love to get the answer to. What are your best foods that you recommend to eat that will help maintain weight loss?
So I kind of alluded to that a moment ago, but eating an abundance of vegetables. And I like to use the Harvard Healthy Plate as kind of a model that people can visualize because it's a plate. Half the plate is vegetables and fruits. You incorporate whole grains that have fiber, choosing proteins that have fiber as well. Whether you include animal proteins or not is, kind of your decision, but making sure that you have fiber and lots of abundance of vegetables on your plate and fruit, which are nutritionally dense but are not calorically dense, can really help with long term weight maintenance. Also, even though it's not really a food, but I would say that checking in with late night eating is also a great strategy. It's not to say that calories in the evening are any more than calories during the day, but the things that people choose to eat at night, especially while they're sitting in front of the television, and that kind of mindless eating can definitely be something that can be useful to cut out and to help with maintaining weight loss.
Oh yeah, man. The late night munchies. That's a very real thing. The late night munchies. That is very real. Gene is wondering, quick yes or no. Would you say that fiber is perhaps the most important nutrient when it comes to weight loss?
I would say fiber, yes, is very important. Protein is too. When you're in a calorie deficit, eating enough adequate protein. Again, we don't need to be overloading ourselves with protein, especially if you are incorporating some resistance training into your lifestyle, which I hope you are if you're in a calorie deficit. That can also help you to maintain your muscle mass. But fiber is very under eaten in our society.
Undereat. I like the way that you put that. It is undereaten and it's underappreciated. I mean, just ask our buddy Will. All right, let's grab a couple of more quick ones. You've been very generous with your time here. Here we go. Colin wants to know: are there any vegan cheeses that you would consider to actually be healthy?
Are we talking about healthy or tasty? It depends. I personally just don't really care for any of the vegan cheeses that I've tried that are ready made. Um, as far as health, you kind of want to look at what they're using as the base ingredient. If coconut milk is involved, that is a source of saturated fat. So we want to be limiting that in our diet. And I actually personally love cashew cheese and I make it on my own, but it ends up being more like a ricotta type of consistency. And that is going to be a source of healthy fat. So that may be helpful.
Final question here comes to us from, let's see, I want a fun one. I want a very fun one to end. Here we go. Jill gets the honor of having the last question of the day. What are some healthy options if you're going to have a cheat day?
So I have a caveat, just like I don't like the word diet, I don't like the word cheat day, or even cheat meal. I call it mindful indulgence. I think it's important to, again, take away the judgment. But if you are planning to have something more indulgent, it's really up to you. If you want to have a little bit of the real thing, go for it. Consider enjoying it and having a small portion and moving on. But some of the kind of more indulgent things that I have found helpful for my patients who have sweet tooth, say, is using fruit. as your sweetener, whether you're doing chia seed pudding, whether you're maybe baking up a little peach cobbler, like an apple cobbler type of dessert for yourself. You don't really have to add a whole lot of fats into that. One of my favorite recipes that I make with my 9-year-old daughter is we'll bake apples and we'll put cinnamon on them, and typically just sprinkle a little bit of granola or oats on top with a little bit of coconut oil, and we'll enjoy that as a dessert. But I just want you to be cognizant of when you call something a cheat, it means you're being bad versus maybe just being mindful and indulging mindfully.
Is it all in the verbiage? Is it the words that we got to choose to make the difference? I
I think so, because
yeah.
there's a judgment. In no way is cheating ever good.
Okay, touche, doc, touche. Okay, here's the deal. If you are lucky enough to live in the Dallas area, and I know that there are a lot of exam roomies who do, they can work with you at Radiant Health. RadiantHealthDallas.com is the website to go to. Talk to me really quickly about what the patient experience is like when they come to see you.
Yeah, so I actually see patients all throughout the state of Texas. So we have a lot of patients that we just see over telemedicine throughout Texas. And if you are over telemedicine versus in person, the only difference is that in our office, we do body composition analysis to better understand what your body fat percentage looks like, how much muscle mass you have, so that you're able to kind of go beyond just the full weight, if you will. For my patients, it's very personalized. We have longer visits. We call our first 2 visits foundation visits, where I spend 75 to 90 minutes talking about all these different areas that we talked about today. But in particular, what does your nutrition and lifestyle pattern currently look like? What are your habits? What are your triggers for eating? What does your family life look like? What is your sleep, your stress levels, your exercise, all of that. And then we customize a program for you. And I see people monthly as part of their membership when they belong to me as a patient. And we do weekly health coaching. I reach out to everyone virtually to check in and see how they're doing on their personalized goals. And once people are through their monthly program, we eventually go into maintenance, where I see them every 3 to 6 months. And basically, the idea is to partner with you as your doctor, as your health coach. I keep people's primary care physicians in the loop, and to really help you with that sustainable, lasting weight loss.
Yeah. At the top, we were talking about putting all of those pieces together for a comprehensive plan. Certainly, you're doing that. Your patients are lucky to have you. And yeah, outside of Dallas, all throughout the state of Texas, we got a pretty big audience. So hopefully there's some people who, well, I don't want to say hopefully here, but if somebody is hearing this, they're feeling disillusioned, like they're kind of at their wits' end, that approach, take it from my experience, is the one that you're going to want to look at. So radianthealthdallas.com is the website to go to. If you're outside of Texas, no problem there. Richa Mittal .com is the website there. Subscribe to the newsletter, stay in touch. And we have links to both right now in the show description. Doc, thank you so much for being here. This has just been an absolute treat. There's so much that I still want to get to with you, but we're out of time today. So what I would love to do is to be able to extend an invitation for you to come back at some point on the show.
I would love to do that. I feel like we have so much we could discuss. And thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed our conversation.
If your health IQ is a couple of points higher than it was a few minutes ago, go ahead and like this video or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And to take it even higher, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your favorite shows. Look for The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. Hit the subscribe button there as well and help to make your world a healthier place.